I still remember the smell of the ocean mixing with fresh pine when my father and I built that beach cabin 25 years ago. It wasn't just wood and nails, it was every fishing trip, every laugh, every late-night story told under a leaking roof. So when I pulled up the dirt road that morning and saw 3 shiny SUVs parked in my driveway, I thought maybe I had the wrong address. But then I saw at my cabin freshly painted beige, with an HOA banner hanging right over the porch. A woman in a bright pink blazer and oversized sunglasses stepped out, clipboard in hand. "Can I help you?" she said sweetly. When I told her this was my property, she smiled like I'd told a joke. "Oh honey," she said, "this house was abandoned. The HOA took custody." Then she held up one of my old family photos from inside the cabin. "Before we dive into this wild story, tell me where you're watching from. And don't forget to hit subscribe, because what happens next, you won't believe." The first thing I did after Karen waved my family photo like a trophy was breathe slow, steady, the way my dad taught me when a fishing line snagged and threatened to snap. "Step back, look at what you've got, then pull," he'd say. So I stepped back. I looked, and all I saw was theft with paperwork. "Abandoned?" I asked, forcing a smile. "Lady, I was here in June. The only thing abandoned is your sense of boundaries." She angled the clipboard like a badge. "Per Article 9, Section B of Seaview Shores HOA, any structure left neglected or unoccupied beyond a reasonable period." She stressed the phrase like it came pre-underlined. "May be reclaimed for community use." "Define reasonable," I said. "Varies by board determination." The way she said board made it sound like royalty, and the board determined this cabin was abandoned. No utilities, no lawn care, storm shutters still up, classic signs. "We've already initiated occupancy for stabilization. You're trespassing." She said it so sweetly that a gull could have flown into the porch and applauded. Behind her, a man with gym shoulders and a sunburned neck stepped through my front door carrying a box labeled kitchen. He didn't look at me. He looked at Karen, waiting for a nod. She gave it. He disappeared inside with my life in his arms. I pulled my phone out and hit record. "Say that again," I said. "Who are you, and why are you moving property into my home?" She put on a smile I've only seen on garden gnomes. "I'm Karen Whitfield, president of the HOA. This is board business. Recording is prohibited on HOA property without consent." "You're on my porch," I said. She tilted her sunglasses down, meeting my eyes over the rim. "Not anymore." I wanted to laugh. Instead, I called the county non-emergency line. While it rang, a second SUV door slammed. Another person emerged with a roll of plastic drawer liners and a vase wrapped in newspaper. The humiliation crawled hot up my neck. My father taught me how to lay the first joist in this place. Now strangers were lining the drawers. "Non-emergency, what's your situation?" the operator asked. "Home invasion under color of HOA," I said. "Owner on site, documents in my glove box. Trespassers claiming abandonment." The operator took my information and said a patrol car was on the way. I felt that tiny shift in my chest, the hinge between dread and relief. Karen noticed it too. "Calling the police was a mistake," she said lightly. "You're about to find out how the law actually works here." "How it works is I have a deed," I snapped. She fluttered a few pages. "You also have unpaid assessments for storm debris removal, unaddressed vegetation encroachment, and a non-standard exterior color. My dad and I stained it cedar," I said. "Every year." "Exactly," she said. "Non-standard." While we waited, I walked to the edge of the porch and stared at the small brass plate beneath the rail, "Hayes Cabin." I'd polished it before I left in June, right after the hurricane inspection, when the adjuster took photos and told me to keep the shutters up until final approval. Insurance delays had stretched through July and August. I was back now to reopen, repaint, and breathe. But apparently in Seaview Shores, breathing is a violation if you don't file the right form. The patrol car crunched over shell gravel. 2 officers stepped out, one older one, young enough to still look uncertain in the Sunday. Karen's posture shifted into performance mode. "Officers," she called, descending the steps with a practiced half-wave. "Thank you for coming. We're stabilizing an abandoned property per Article 9. "Hold up," I said, meeting them halfway. "Robert Hayes, owner." I handed the older officer my license and a folder with copies of the deed, tax receipts, and the hurricane claim correspondence. "I've been through enough HOA nonsense to carry a paper trail like a talisman." The older officer skimmed, then glanced at Karen's sheaf. "Ma'am?" She presented her bundle like communion. Board resolutions, notices posted on the door, and photographic evidence of neglect. Mail piled up. No utilities, the power's on a vacation hold, I said. Approved by the electric company during hurricane season, the water shutoff was at the county's recommendation to prevent pipe bursts. Insurance inspection orders in the folder. The young officer took the folder, flipping pages. Looks like you notified the insurer and the utility. Karen didn't flinch. Article 9 allows us to act when a property is a hazard to surrounding homes. After the storm, this structure was shuttered for months. We posted notices. No response. You posted a flyer the size of a parking ticket, I said. In a wind corridor. We also emailed, she said. To what address, I asked. She hesitated. The one on file. The one you never updated because your secretary didn't like the font in my submission form, I said. Cheryl wrote me a handwritten note about Comic Sans. The older officer cleared his throat. Folks, let's keep this to the point. Mr. Hayes, do you consent to them being inside your residence? Absolutely not, I said. Karen's smile barely moved. The board has taken temporary custody to prevent blight. We've already installed safety measures. Safety measures, I repeated. New locks, she said. I took a measured breath. You changed my locks and moved your stuff in, and you're calling it safety. Community stewardship, she corrected. While the officers conferred, two heads bent like gulls picking the same clam, I wandered to the side yard. The grass was a little long, yes, but sea oats and dune grasses always blur the edges here. A salt-warmed breeze pushed through the palms. Beyond the dunes, the Atlantic breathed its patient, endless breath, retreating and returning like memory. I could hear my dad's laugh in the surf. I felt that hinge shift again, dread to resolve. I walked back in time to hear the older officer say, "We can't determine ownership disputes on scene." He looked at me. "You'll need to take this up with the county property office and possibly civil court. For now, given the documents she's presenting..." "You're kidding," I said. "We're going to ask both parties not to escalate. No further moving of items in or out until this is cleared up." Karen clasped her hands like she was accepting a bouquet. "Of course, officer." The young one added, apologetic. "We're not saying it's legal, sir. We just can't enforce your deed without a judge's order when there's an HOA claim." My tongue tasted like salt and rust. "So she can keep sleeping in my bed." "Don't be dramatic," Karen said. "We brought new linens." I laughed then because the alternative was something ugly. "New linens," I repeated. "That's considerate. Did you also consider not committing fraud?" "Words like that can be defamatory," she said. "Sweet, like poison. Especially when you're on video, Cheryl." She turned. The nosy secretary I remembered from meetings, bangs like a helmet, lips pursed around a permanent disapproval, stepped onto the porch with her phone held high and horizontal. "You're live," Cheryl announced. I raised my own phone. Me too. We stood there, phones pointed like dueling pistols. The officers, already done with all of us, retreated to the patrol car to enter notes. "Fine," I said. "If we're playing by procedures, let's play by all of them." I set my phone to wide angle and filmed the HOA banner draped over my porch like a flag over conquered ground. Article 9, Section B, right, show me the official filing with the county, the stamped notice of abandonment, the insurance correspondence, the certified letters. Karen's mouth narrowed. "We're not obligated to share internal board documents." "You are, if you're asserting authority over my property," I said. "I'll be asking the county clerk for your filings today. If they don't exist, this is unlawful entry. If they do, we'll see if they meet state statutes. Spoiler, they don't." Her husband, let's call him Bob, with the gym shoulders, came out again, this time with my father's tackle box. Something in me snapped at the sight of that dented old green metal. "Put that down," I said, stepping forward. Bob glanced at Karen. She didn't nod. She didn't need to. The box disappeared inside again. I took a breath so deep it felt like the ocean filled my ribs. Then I turned to the officers. "Thank you for coming. I'll handle this legally." I looked at Karen. "But hear me clearly, this isn't over because you stapled a banner to my porch." She pursed her lips. "The community won't be intimidated." "Intimidated," I said. "Karen, I built this place with my father's hands and my own. You stapled polyester to it. Between us, only one of us knows how to hold a hammer." Her sunglasses hid her eyes, but not the flash of heat behind them. "Leave," she said softly. I did. Not because she told me to, but because my dad's voice said, "Step back. Look at what you've got. Then pull." I drove to the marina parked where the gulls fight over dropped French fries and called Miguel, my contractor and friend. He answered on the second ring. "Tell me this is about fixing something that doesn't involve cops," he said. "Wish I could," I said, and told him everything. "I'll bring the drone," he said. "Also the coffee." You sound like you need it. Then I called Lydia, my neighbor, 3 houses down, retired paralegal and full-time HOA skeptic. She answered with the joy of someone who keeps a file cabinet labeled receipts. I knew that woman would try a stunt, Lydia said. I've got screenshots of their little community guest house posts they've been flirting with on Nextdoor, and the Airbnb listing tied to a cousin in Tampa. Oh, honey, we're gonna have us a day. Get me copies, I said. Everything with timestamps. Already printing, she said, and I could hear the laser printer whistle to life. By the time I got back to the cabin road, the sun had tilted west. Shadows lengthened across dune grass like long, patient fingers. A motion alert pinged my phone from the trail cam I'd left, pointed at the side porch back in June to watch for raccoons. I pulled up the feed. There they were, Karen and Cheryl hauling a box labeled "Linens past my window like bridesmaids of a hostile wedding." I saved the clip, titled it Exhibit A, and smiled without humor. Game on, I told the sea. By the time the sun rose the next morning, I had a plan, half caffeine, half rage. My truck smelled like burnt coffee and old determination. I parked at the overlook, where the dunes hid my cabin from view, and set up the drone Miguel brought. We'd upgraded it last year to help survey storm damage. Today it was evidence. Miguel squinted into the monitor. You sure you want to see this, man? I'm sure, I said. Let's find out how abandoned my house really is. The drone rose quietly over the palms, its propellers slicing the humid air. From the screen, I watched the world tilt waves rolling the porch, coming into focus. And there they were, Karen and her husband Bob, standing on my porch with cups of coffee like they owned the sunrise. Tell me that's not real, I muttered. Miguel zoomed in. They're living there, bro. That's breakfast. Karen laughed at something Bob said. Then she bent down, picked up a bucket of white paint, and began brushing it across my cedar rail. She painted right over the brass plate that said Hayes Cabin. I felt my throat tighten. That plate's been there since my dad Miguel looked at me. I know. The drone hovered closer. Karen finished painting, stepped back, and hung a new wooden sign, Community Guest House. Below it, she nailed a laminated HOA seal like it was some royal decree. I stared at the monitor, heart pounding. She's not just squatting. She's branding it. We flew the drone higher. Through the open front door, I could see boxes stacked neatly along the walls, my walls. The vintage fishing net my dad used to hang above the mantel was gone, replaced by a cheap framed print that said "Beach Vibes Only." That was the moment the anger shifted. It wasn't loud or wild. It was cold. Controlled. The kind that makes you measure your steps before you strike. Get photos, I said quietly. Video. Every angle. Miguel nodded, piloting slow sweeps around the property, while I scrolled through last night's trail cam alerts. Dozens of clips, all time-stamped. Karen unlocking my door, Bob hauling furniture, Cheryl directing from the porch, pointing like a general. When I opened the next file, I froze. The HOA banner was gone. In its place, Christmas lights. They were decorating. I watched as Karen plugged in a string of lights across my porch rail and clapped when they lit up. Miguel looked over my shoulder and let out a low whistle. They're nesting. They're trespassing, I corrected. He nodded, still staring, and filming a TikTok about it. What? He turned the drone camera. Sure enough, Cheryl stood near the driveway, holding her phone, panning across the scene. Her caption flashed briefly on the live screen, HOA makes abandoned cabin shine again. I almost laughed. Almost. They're really that confident, I said. Or that dumb, Miguel replied. Either way, I knew I needed the cops again, but not just any local patrol. I needed proof so solid, even Karen's laminated rules couldn't smother it. I spent the rest of the day gathering everything. Insurance letters, utility receipts, my father's will that listed the cabin as inheritance. Lydia dropped by with a USB drive, pulled their Airbnb listing before they deleted it, she said, handing it over. I plugged it in and stared. There it was, my living room, my fireplace, my dad's handmade coffee table, all in glossy photos with the caption, Serene Oceanfront Guest House, hosted by Cheryl W. $180 per night. Unbelievable, I muttered. They didn't even change the rug. They're using HOA money for cleaning fees, Lydia said. Karen submitted invoices labeled community maintenance. I looked at her stunned. You serious? She smiled grimly. Dead serious. And that's not the half of it. Their cousins managing 3 other so-called abandoned properties in the same zip code. My phone buzzed a new motion alert. I opened the live feed. Karen again, this time hauling in a box labeled towels. Bob followed with a small safe. Cheryl held the door open. They're moving in, I said softly. Lydia crossed her arms. Then it's time we move out. That night I parked near the dunes, keeping the headlights off. The moon cast silver light across the sand enough to see the cabin in faint silhouette. Through the windows, warm light glowed my lamps, my home. My memories turned into their living room. I watched through binoculars as Karen poured wine. She laughed loudly, clinking glasses with Bob. Behind them, Cheryl filmed again, narrating something I couldn't hear. I imagined the caption already forming: HOA board celebrates restoration success. I zoomed in and caught sight of the mantle she'd replaced my dad's framed fishing license with a cheesy lighthouse print. That did it. I got out of the truck, walked down the narrow sand path, and hit record on my phone. The sea roared behind me, wind whipping my flannel shirt. When I reached the porch, I could hear music, some upbeat beach tune, and laughter. I knocked once hard. The laughter stopped. After a moment, the door opened. Karen stood there, wineglass in hand, her face freezing mid-smile. "Oh," she said, "it's you again. Nice decor," I said. "Did you also repaint my father's ashes, or is that next on the renovation list?" Her face twitched. "You're trespassing again, Mr. Hayes." I raised my phone. "I'm recording for my insurance company. Say hello." Bob appeared behind her, holding the wine bottle like it might be a weapon. "You need to leave," he said. I took a step back, angling the camera to capture the interior, the furniture, the boxes, the wine on the table. "Already have enough footage to make a sheriff blush," I said. "But go ahead. Tell me again how this is HOA property." Karen's tone sharpened. "It's under protective custody by the HOA until further notice. You've been absent for over 90 days. 83, I interrupted. "And legally notified the county." "That's irrelevant. Not to a judge." She crossed her arms. "We'll see about that." "Oh, we will," I said. "Every pixel of this is going straight to the county recorder and my lawyer. You just turned an HOA dispute into a criminal trespass case." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "You think anyone's going to side with you after you abandon the neighborhood?" I looked past her at Bob, sipping nervously. "You mean the neighborhood you turned into a hotel chain?" She blinked. For the first time, her confidence cracked. "Good night, Karen," I said, lowering my phone. "Enjoy the guest house. While it lasts." I turned and walked away, the sound of her shouting behind me mixing with the waves. Back at the truck, I replayed the footage. Every frame was gold, her admitting protective custody, her standing inside my cabin, my belongings clearly visible. Evidence, cold, solid, undeniable. Miguel texted, "Got aerial stills, sending folder." Lydia texted, "Next county assessor's office opens at 8. I'll meet you there." I leaned back against the seat, staring at the dark outline of the cabin. "You wanted a war, Karen," I whispered. "Now you've got one." The next morning, the county clerk confirmed what I already suspected: no record of abandonment, no filed transfer of property, no authorization for HOA occupancy. The clerk even laughed when I showed her the banner photo. "They can't just claim a house," she said. "That's not how any of this works. Tell that to them," I muttered. She handed me stamped copies of the property records. "Take these. You'll need them for law enforcement. Oh, and maybe call the code enforcement office. They'll love this." By noon, I was sitting with the sheriff's investigator, showing him the footage. He watched silently, leaning closer when Karen appeared on screen holding my photo frame. "She really said it was abandoned?" he asked. "Verbatim," I said. "And then she moved in." He rubbed his chin. "We've had complaints about that HOA before. Power-hungry folks. But moving in? That's new. So, what can I do?" I asked. He looked at me with that tired cop expression, the kind that says, "This is going to take time. We'll need to file a formal report. You've got enough evidence for criminal trespass and possible fraud. Just don't go back there until we process it." I nodded. "Fine, but I'll be watching." That night, I set up new cameras hidden, this time disguised as birdhouses and solar lights. The moment they connected to my phone, I saw everything: Karen sitting on my porch, swing, sipping wine again, flipping through my father's old photo album. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't just stealing a house. She was trying to erase a history, my family's history, and replace it with her own version of community. I closed my laptop and stared out at the moonlit waves. "You picked the wrong house," I whispered, "and the wrong man. Because if she wanted a war built on rules, I was about to build one on evidence, and I had more tools than she could ever imagine." When I woke up the next morning, my first thought wasn't coffee. It was war. By 6 a.m., I was already printing out screenshots, timestamps, and drone photos on Lydia's dining table. Her little coastal house smelled like sea salt and printer ink. She sat across from me in a robe, hair up in a bun, eyes fierce and awake. "You know what Karen's biggest mistake was?" she said, sipping her tea. "Painting over my dad's nameplate," I muttered. She smiled thinly. "No." Thinking she could out-paperwork me. Lydia used to work as a paralegal for a real estate attorney before she retired to this neighborhood of peaceful retirees. The same peaceful retirees who spent half their week in HOA meetings fighting about mailbox colors. She still had every form and legal statute saved in her cloud. If Karen was queen of the HOA, Lydia was the archivist of her downfall. Miguel joined us mid-morning, still chewing a breakfast sandwich. He dropped his phone on the table and played the drone footage again. Karen's voice filled the room. Community custody, we're protecting the property, followed by Cheryl's shrill laugh in the background. Lydia raised an eyebrow. You recorded audio? Full surround, Miguel said proudly. I nodded. Every word, every illegal thing they said on my property. Good, Lydia said. We'll package it properly. You can't just dump this on Facebook. You need a chain of custody. We'll send it to the sheriff and the county investigator. Miguel grinned. Oh, I already sent it to someone. I frowned. Who? He shrugged. My cousin at Channel 8 News. They run that Scam of the Week segment. Lydia almost spit her tea. You didn't. He smiled wider. Hey, the people deserve entertainment. I sighed. Let's hope it's entertainment and not a lawsuit. Lydia started organizing the documents. Don't worry, Karen's the one who committed fraud. You're the one with the receipts. By noon, I had my timeline pinned to her corkboard photographs, HOA emails, county maps, even screenshots from the Airbnb listing that still hadn't been deleted completely. Each piece was connected with red string, like we were solving a murder. And in a way, we were the murder of my father's legacy. Miguel leaned back in his chair. You realize she's going to panic when this hits the county office. That's the point, I said. I want her nervous enough to make mistakes. Lydia smiled. Oh, she will. Karen's pride is her weakness. She can't resist doubling down. That afternoon, I drove to the sheriff's office with a flash drive full of evidence. The deputy recognized me immediately. You're the guy with the cabin thing, right? Yeah, I said, handing him the drive. Here's everything you need. Video, photos, even HOA documents they forged. He plugged it in, scrolling through the folders. Holy hell, this is thorough. Tell me about it, I said. We could write a true crime book, he grinned. We'll start with a police report. After filing everything, I stopped by the county recorder's office. The clerk looked amused when she saw me again. Back so soon? Just making sure the HOA didn't magically file anything new. She typed a few keys and shook her head. Still, nothing. But I did forward your materials to the property compliance department. They might take this up as an enforcement case. That made me smile. Perfect. By evening, the first crack appeared. Lydia texted me a screenshot from the neighborhood forum. Karen had posted, due to malicious harassment and misinformation being spread online, the HOA will no longer tolerate trespassing or slanderous claims regarding community-managed properties. The comment section was gold. Neighbors asked why she was living in community property, why the HOA was suddenly renting on Airbnb, and why a police cruiser had been spotted outside her house that morning. Karen replied defensively, claiming she had official permission from the county. Lydia replied with a link to the county's public records portal showing nothing filed. The thread exploded. By the next day, everyone in Seaview Shores was talking about it. The local Facebook group was split into factions, Team Karen and Team Sanity. That night, I drove back to the cabin with Miguel. We parked at a distance, hidden behind the palms. The porch light was still on. But something new caught my eye, tiny sparkles of light in the yard. Those aren't fireflies, I said. Miguel grinned. Trail cameras. You upgraded, I nodded. Solar-powered infrared high-res. Every angle covered. If she so much as sneezes on my property, it's recorded. We sat in silence, watching from the truck as the ocean wind rustled the palms. Then movement. Karen appeared in the doorway wearing a robe, carrying what looked like a wine glass and a clipboard. Bob followed her out, arguing about something. Miguel zoomed the camera. Dude, she's holding a rental checklist. Unbelievable, I said. They started rearranging porch furniture, my porch furniture. Karen pointed to the lawn, giving orders. Bob carried out a vacuum cleaner. They're prepping for guests, Miguel said flatly. They're insane, I replied. Lydia texted again. Channel 8 just called. They want an interview tomorrow morning. Perfect timing, I said. Let's give them a show. The next morning, the news van rolled into Seaview Shores like a shark fin slicing calm water. Neighbors came out with coffee cups pretending not to stare. Karen was on her lawn in full HOA regalia, a red blazer pearls, and an expression that could peel paint. When the reporter approached her microphone ready, she smiled wide. We're very proud of our community stewardship. The HOA has done an excellent job maintaining abandoned properties for the good of all residents. Behind her, my cabin gleamed on camera, lights on curtains, drawn the community guest house sign clearly visible. Then the reporter turned to me. "Mr. Hayes, care to respond?" I held up my folder and smiled. "Sure, that's my house. I have the deed insurance records, police reports, and about 6 hours of footage of her drinking wine on my porch." The camera panned back to Karen. Her face went through the 5 stages of panic in 3 seconds. That's false," she stammered. "We had permission." "From who?" I asked. "From the community board, which consists of you, your husband, and Cheryl," I said, "who also happens to be the Airbnb host for my property." The reporter raised an eyebrow. "Is that true, ma'am?" Karen sputtered. "We were just preserving community value." That night the segment aired at 6:30 sharp. HOA accused of taking over private property. The story spread faster than a hurricane warning. Comments flooded social media. Former residents shared their own horror stories. Karen's perfect facade cracked wide open. The next day, Lydia knocked on my door holding her phone like a trophy. "You're trending," I opened the article. "Local HOA President under investigation for property fraud. The county had officially opened an inquiry." Miguel leaned over my shoulder. "You're famous, bro." "Yeah," I said. "But we're not done." We spent the rest of the day assembling the next wave of evidence, financial reports, HOA spending maintenance invoices. Lydia found line items that didn't make sense. Community repair $2 $450, temporary occupancy staging $1 $200, all paid to C. Whitfield, Karen's cousin. I whistled. "She's been embezzling HOA funds, too." Classic Karen, Lydia said. "Control everything, pay yourself for doing it." I uploaded everything to the sheriff's secure portal, labeling each file fraud, misuse of HOA funds, trespass, theft. That night, I watched the live feed one more time. Karen's lights were still on, but her porch banner was gone. She'd finally taken it down, probably after the news aired. I smiled to myself. "Stage 1, I whispered. Complete." The phone buzzed again, an unknown number. "Mr. Hayes," a male voice asked. "This is Investigator Benton with the County Compliance Office. We've received your evidence. I just wanted to let you know we'll be visiting the property tomorrow morning for inspection." I leaned back, satisfied. "Perfect. I'll be there." When I hung up, I looked out the window toward the dark horizon where my cabin sat, waves crashing just beyond the dunes. The tide was coming in, and for once it was on my side. By sunrise, I was parked half a mile from the cabin engine, off, binoculars in hand. The air smelled of seaweed and tension. Investigator Benton and his 2 county compliance officers were scheduled to arrive at 9 sharp. I wanted to make sure Karen didn't catch wind before the trap was ready. Miguel sat beside me in the passenger seat, munching on a stale donut like we were on a stakeout, which technically we were. "You really think she's dumb enough to show up during an inspection?" he asked with his mouth full. "Karen doesn't miss a chance to perform," I said. "She'll be here the second she sees a clipboard." And sure enough, at 8:42 a.m., a shiny white SUV rolled up the gravel drive like it owned the coastline. Out stepped Karen, pearl earrings, glinting red blazer, crisp sunglasses big enough to shield her from accountability. Behind her, Bob lumbered out carrying a tool belt and an attitude. Miguel grinned. "There she is, HOA Barbie and Ken of the apocalypse." I chuckled. "Get the drone ready." By the time the county car pulled in, the drone was airborne, filming everything from above the officers approaching the porch, Karen striding to intercept like a game show host greeting contestants. I cracked the window slightly to hear the exchange. "Good morning, ma'am," Benton said, flipping open his badge. "County Compliance Inspection. We've received complaints regarding improper occupancy and unfiled property modifications at this address." Karen laughed high, fake brittle. "Complaints? Oh no, this must be a misunderstanding. This property is under HOA custodianship. We've already submitted all paperwork. Then you won't mind showing us copies," Benton replied calmly. She hesitated. "They're, in the office." "Perfect," he said. "We'll follow you there after we finish here." Her smile faltered. "Well, the office isn't, open on weekends. It's Wednesday," Benton said. Miguel elbowed me. "Oh man, she's cooked." We got out quietly and started walking closer, keeping behind the palms. Benton and his team began snapping photos of the porch, the locks, the sign reading Community Guest House. He jotted notes on a clipboard. Karen's voice wavered between charm and command. "You can't just take pictures of HOA property without authorization." Benton didn't even look up. "This isn't HOA property, ma'am. It's county-registered private land owned by Mr. Robert Hayes." Her jaw tightened. "That's under dispute." Benton turned eyes cool behind mirrored sunglasses. "We checked the filings. There's no active dispute. No abandonment notice, no legal transfer. In fact, there's no documentation at all supporting your claim. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I saw fear flickering across her face. It was small, but it was there. Bob shifted beside her, whispering something. She shot him a glare sharp enough to cut steel. "Ma'am," Benton continued, "are you currently occupying this property?" Karen's voice pitched up an octave. "Of course not. We were simply maintaining it. Voluntarily. For safety reasons." While drinking wine on the porch, Benton asked, holding up a printed still from the drone footage. "With string lights and rental listings under your secretary's name, I almost felt bad for her." "Almost." Karen's face turned red. "This is harassment," Benton shook his head. "This is evidence." He gestured toward his colleague, who handed her a citation form. "Until further notice, you and your board are ordered to vacate and cease all unauthorized occupation. Violations may result in criminal charges." Her jaw dropped. "You can't do this. The HOA outranks." "No, ma'am," Benton interrupted, tone like granite. "The law outranks the HOA," Miguel whispered. "That's going in the highlight reel." I stepped out from behind the palms, letting her see me. The moment our eyes met, her expression twisted. "You," she spat. "You set this up." "Technically you set it up," I said. "I just brought the popcorn." Bob took a step forward, puffing up like a bull. "You're trespassing again." Benton raised his hand. "Sir, step back. This is an active inspection." I walked up the path calmly, holding my phone, recording everything. "Just wanted to see the place one more time before it gets professionally cleaned," I said. Karen's voice cracked. "You'll pay for this, Hayes." "I already did," I replied. "In cash 25 years ago." Miguel snorted so loud Benton had to hide a smile. The officers entered the cabin to inspect. Karen tried to follow, but Benton blocked her. "County access only. You'll receive a written notice once we're finished." When they came back out 15 minutes later, Benton held a clipboard heavy with notes. "We found personal belongings, opened wine bottles, new paint inconsistent with original records, and electrical modifications performed without permits. That's multiple violations." Karen looked ready to combust. "You can't just accuse me of—" "I'm not accusing," Benton said. "I'm documenting." I stepped closer, voice calm but sharp. "Funny thing, Karen, you wanted to protect this property. Congratulations. Now it's being protected by the county sheriff." She turned toward the street where neighbors had started gathering, drawn by the sight of government vehicles and a woman melting down in pearls. Phones were out, cameras rolling. "This is all lies," she shouted. "He's making me look bad," a neighbor called out. "You didn't need help with that." Karen's laughter rippled through the small crowd. Bob grabbed her arm. "Let's go." "No," she snapped, jerking free. "They need to hear the truth." "The truth," Benton said evenly, "is in our report. You'll be hearing from the county attorney's office soon." She glared at him, then at me. "You'll regret this, Hayes." "I doubt it," I said. "But you might." The officers left, the crowd dispersed, and Miguel clapped me on the back. "That was beautiful, man. Like a live HOA exorcism." I exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. "It's not over yet," I said. "She's not the type to go quietly." And I was right. That evening, as I reviewed the footage at home, I caught something new. At 5:17 p.m., after Benton left, Karen snuck back into the cabin through a side door carrying a thick envelope. She looked around nervously, pulled something from the envelope, and slid it into the kitchen drawer. Then she left. I paused the video. "What the hell was that?" Miguel leaned over my shoulder. "Looks like paperwork." Lydia, who just arrived with pizza, frowned. "Planting evidence, maybe. Or hiding it," I said. We all looked at each other. There was only one way to find out. That night, under the cover of a fog-heavy sky, we drove back to the cabin. The sheriff's temporary locks were still on, and since I had the legal key now, I opened the door quietly. The air inside smelled like wine and lemon cleaner, a desperate attempt to erase guilt. We searched the kitchen first. Sure enough, in the second drawer beside the sink was the envelope. Inside were several documents, fake abandonment forms printed with county seals but wrong fonts, wrong signatures. Amateur forgeries. Lydia whistled softly. She really thought this would work. Miguel flipped one page over. "Dude, there's a check stub here. Payment to C. Whitfield Community Restoration Fund. Amount $3,800. I took photos of everything, careful not to disturb the evidence too much. She's digging her own grave." As we left, I glanced at the living room wall. The sign "Community Guest House" still hung there, crooked and smug. I pulled it down and tossed it into the trash bin. "This cabin doesn't need a new name," I said quietly. "It already has one." The next morning, I turned the envelope over to Benton. His eyebrows shot up. "She forged official documents right down to the fake seal," I said. He sighed. This just went from civil dispute to criminal investigation. Expect a call from the state attorney. By evening, word had spread again, this time faster. Karen's followers on the HOA board began turning on her. Bob avoided everyone's calls. Cheryl deleted her social media accounts. And me, I finally sat on my porch again, the real brass plate glinting in the sunset. The war wasn't finished, but the tide had turned. Karen wanted control. Now she was about to lose everything she'd ever tried to rule. The following week, the storm finally broke, not the one outside, but the legal kind that flattens reputations faster than a hurricane flattens beach chairs. The county investigator called me early Monday morning. Mr. Hayes Benton said over the phone, voice steady and official, the state attorney's office has accepted the case. They're opening an inquiry into fraudulent filings and unauthorized occupancy. You may be required to testify. Testify, I said, sitting up in bed. You mean in court? Yes, sir. We're moving forward. I hung up and just sat there for a moment, staring at the sunlight bleeding through the blinds. My father would have loved this. He used to say, the truth doesn't shout, it waits. And now, finally, the truth had waited long enough. By Wednesday, I was standing outside the courthouse in downtown Flagler Beach. The air smelled like salt and paperwork. Lydia met me on the steps, arms full of binders. Ready to ruin an HOA, she asked with a grin. Miguel joined us a moment later, wearing a clean shirt for once. Man, I brought popcorn, he whispered. Inside the courtroom was half-full neighbors, reporters, and a few rubberneckers who'd followed the viral news story. Karen sat at the defendant's table beside her, attorney, a thin man in an expensive suit who looked like he charged by the syllable. She wore all black this time, her pearls gone, hair pulled tight. She didn't look like the queen of the HOA anymore. She looked like someone trying to convince the world she still mattered. When the judge entered, the room fell quiet. Court is now in session, the bailiff announced. Case 22 to 4,769 Hayes versus Seaview Shores Homeowners Association. The judge, a silver-haired woman named Judge Harper, adjusted her glasses and peered over them. Let's make this simple, folks. This is a property dispute turned criminal inquiry. I expect professionalism, not soap opera. If only she knew. Karen's lawyer opened strong, painting her as a misunderstood community leader. My client was simply preserving neighborhood value. She believed in good faith that the property had been abandoned. The HOA took reasonable steps to maintain it. Harper leaned back. Good faith, you say? Did she file any official notice of abandonment? He hesitated. Well, not exactly. Then your argument is faith-based indeed, she said dryly. The courtroom chuckled. Then it was our turn. My attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense guy named Doyle, stood up with Lydia's binder in hand. Your Honor, we have visual, digital, and documentary evidence proving Mrs. Whitfield, acting as HOA President, knowingly entered my client's property without authorization, altered its condition, and rented it out online under a false listing. Furthermore, we have discovered falsified documents with forged county seals. He clicked the remote. The first photo flashed on the courtroom monitor, Karen, wine glass in hand, standing on my porch beneath the community guest house sign. Karen's face drained of color. The next image appeared, a drone shot of her and Bob unloading boxes labeled kitchen and linens. Then a video clip rolled, complete with audio. This house was abandoned, she said. The HOA took custody. Her voice echoed through the room. You could have heard a pin drop. The judge raised an eyebrow. That's you, Mrs. Whitfield. Karen tried to recover. It's taken out of context, Harper leaned forward. Ma'am, the context appears to be you committing trespass. Doyle continued, and if that weren't enough, we have financial records of HOA funds being misused for so-called maintenance expenses, all paid to her cousin, Miss Cheryl Whitfield, who conveniently ran the Airbnb listing. He held up a printed invoice. $3,800 for community restoration. The memo line reads, guest house preparation. Karen's lawyer tried to object, but the judge overruled. Proceed, she said. Then came the final blow. Doyle pulled up a scanned document, one of the forged abandonment forms we'd found in the kitchen drawer. This document contains a counterfeit county seal. We had the clerk's office verify it. Not only is the seal incorrect, but the signature belongs to a retired employee deceased since 2019. The courtroom gasped. Judge Harper turned to Karen. Mrs. Whitfield, would you care to explain how a deceased county employee signed your paperwork? Karen's hands shook. I don't know. Someone else must have. Bob, sitting behind her, muttered, Oh, for crying out loud, Karen. The judge heard it. Mr. Whitfield, do you wish to testify? He froze. No, Your Honor. Probably wise, she said. Lydia leaned toward me and whispered, She's finished. But Karen wasn't done. She stood suddenly, voice trembling but loud. This man abandoned his property for months. We acted to protect the neighborhood. Everyone here knows how he let it fall apart. The judge banged her gavel once. Sit down, Mrs. Whitfield. But she didn't. He's making me look like a villain, she shouted. All I ever did was care about this community. Doyle turned to the judge calmly. Your Honor, if I may, briefly, Harper said. He gestured to me. My client has one short statement. I stood feeling every eye in the room. Your Honor, that cabin wasn't just a property. My father and I built it together when I was 17. It's part of our family history. And I watched this woman paint over my father's nameplate like it was a graffiti tag. That's not community care. That's greed with a clipboard. The judge studied me for a long moment, then looked at Karen. I've seen HOA disputes. I've seen overreach. But this is arrogance wrapped in bureaucracy. She turned to the bailiff. Seize the forged documents as evidence. Forward copies to the district attorney. And Mrs. Whitfield, Karen's breath caught. Yes, consider this fair warning. If any further fraudulent filings surface, I will refer this case for criminal prosecution. Immediately, Karen sank into her chair. Bob stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Judge Harper banged the gavel. Temporary injunction granted. Property restored to Mr. Hayes. HOA activities suspended pending investigation. Court adjourned. The room erupted in whispers. Cameras flashed. I exhaled, feeling years younger. Lydia squeezed my arm. You did it. Miguel grinned. Bro, that was cinematic. Karen's lawyer packed up in silence, avoiding eye contact. As we left the courtroom, I passed her table. She muttered under her breath. You'll regret this. I paused. Karen, I said quietly, the only thing I regret is ever buying in your neighborhood. Outside reporters swarmed like seagulls on French fries. Microphones and cameras everywhere. Mr. Hayes, how does it feel to win against the HOA? I smiled. Let's just say justice tastes like salt, air, and victory. The next few days were chaos for Seaview Shores. Karen's friends on the HOA board resigned one by one, each issuing the same statement. We were misled. The HOA's bank accounts were frozen. Their lawyer withdrew representation. I got a letter from the county thanking me for assisting in uncovering a pattern of fraudulent claims. Lydia framed it. Miguel naturally turned it into a meme. When the HOA messes around and finds out. Still, I couldn't relax yet. Something in Karen's eyes that day in court told me she wasn't finished. Pride like hers doesn't die quietly, it festers. Sure enough, 3 nights later, my phone pinged. Motion detected front porch. I opened the live feed. There she was. Karen alone in the dark, staring up at the brass plate. She reached out fingers, brushing the engraved letters, Hayes, Cabin. For a second, her face softened, almost human. Then she whispered something I could barely hear. You ruined everything. I stayed silent, watching through the camera. She turned and disappeared into the night. When the sheriff came the next morning to check the area, there were footprints in the sand, leading away, not toward. Maybe she'd finally realized what she'd lost. As I sat on the porch that evening, coffee steaming in my hands, I watched the waves roll in. The same sound my father and I used to listen to when we built this place. For the first time in months, the ocean sounded peaceful again. The HOA might have started this war, but I'd ended it. And deep down, I knew the storm wasn't just over for me. It was over for everyone Karen ever tried to control. I thought the courtroom would be the grand finale, the curtain drop after the chaos. But I underestimated one thing. When a queen loses her crown, she doesn't disappear quietly. She drags her entire kingdom down with her. 2 days after the ruling, I drove past the Seaview Shores Community Hall, the same place where Karen used to hold her mandatory meetings. There were no balloons or coffee trays this time. Just folding chairs tipped over papers, scattered, and a single handwritten sign taped to the door, Emergency HOA Session, Members Only. I parked down the street and watched from my truck. One by one, cars pulled up, familiar faces from the neighborhood, each wearing an expression halfway between anger and embarrassment. These were Karen's loyal board members, the ones who used to nod through every absurd fine and citation she dreamed up. Now they looked like people attending a funeral. Lydia texted me. You seeing this circus front row seat, I replied. Popcorn ready. At 9:05 a.m. The door opened, and out came Cheryl, the secretary, the same woman who filmed me months ago while calling me a trespasser. She looked rattled, her helmet bangs frizzed from humidity. Behind her, Bob followed, clutching a box of files. Then finally, Karen stepped out. Gone were the pearls and the pressed blazer. She wore plain gray sweats and sunglasses, her confidence stripped bare. She tried to maintain her dignity, barking orders at the others, but no one was listening. I rolled my window down just enough to hear, "You can't just vote me out," Karen snapped. Bob's voice boomed. "You forged documents, Karen. We're getting audited. You dragged all of us into your mess." "Oh, please," she spat. "You think any of you would have had property value without me? I made this neighborhood desirable." Cheryl crossed her arms. "You made us a headline." There was a long, brittle silence. Finally, Bob threw the box of files into the back of his truck and climbed in. "You're on your own," he said. For a moment, Karen just stood there trembling. Then she noticed me. Her sunglasses tilted, revealing those cold blue eyes now rimmed with exhaustion. She marched right up to my window. "You think this makes you the hero, don't you?" she hissed. I kept my tone steady. "No, Karen. It just makes you accountable." She pointed a finger. "You destroyed the HOA, the structure that kept order here." I smiled. "Order? You fined a veteran for hanging an American flag 1 inch too high." Her hand dropped. "Rules are rules," she whispered. "Exactly," I said, starting the engine. "And the law finally applied them to you." I left her standing in the rearview mirror, small against the morning sun, shouting something I couldn't hear. By afternoon, it was official. The Seaview Shores HOA was dissolved. The county froze its remaining assets pending investigation. The neighborhood Facebook group exploded, half the residents cheering, half panicking. Someone posted a meme of Karen's face on a sinking ship labeled HOA Titanic. Miguel came over that evening with beers. "You're trending again, man," he said, tossing me his phone. The headline read, "Local HOA collapses after president charged with fraud and trespassing." The thumbnail was Karen mid-yell, captured from the courthouse footage. Lydia arrived moments later with a folder of documents. Counties pressing 3 counts of fraud, 2 of forgery, and 1 of criminal trespass. "Bob's cutting a deal to testify." "Smart man," I said. "He's finally learning to duck when the storm hits." We toasted under the porch light. The cabin looked alive again, warm, safe mine. The brass plate gleamed. The air was filled with ocean salt laughter and a faint hint of justice. For the first time in months, I felt peace. That lasted until midnight. The motion alert buzzed my phone. I almost ignored it. False alarms happened with wind or raccoons. But something in my gut said check. I opened the live feed. Karen, standing barefoot in the sand, her gray sweat soaked from the tide. She was staring at the cabin, silent, her hair wild in the wind. "What the hell?" I muttered, grabbing my jacket. By the time I stepped outside, the night air was thick with fog. I called the sheriff's line as I walked down the dune trail. "It's Hayes. She's back again." "We'll dispatch a unit," the dispatcher said calmly. When I reached the porch, she was there, framed by the moonlight, her feet leaving dark, wet prints across the wood. "Karen," I said quietly, "you need to go home." She turned slowly, eyes glassy. "There is no home," she said. "They all left. They sold. The HOA's gone. That's not my fault." She laughed softly. "You ruined everything I built. You built it on lies," I said. She stepped closer. "You think people need freedom, but they need order. Without me, this place will rot. People need rules." I shook my head. "No, Karen, people need decency. That's what you forgot." She stared at me for a long time, and for just a moment I saw it: guilt. Real human guilt flickering behind her mask. Then it vanished. "You'll see," she said. "You'll all see what happens without me." Before I could respond, she turned and walked down the beach, disappearing into the mist. The deputies found her a mile down the coast, sitting near the waterline, staring at the horizon. They didn't arrest her, not that night. She went quietly. The next morning, the sun rose bright and golden, as if the whole world was trying to scrub the night clean. I sat on the porch, watching the waves crash, sipping coffee from my father's old mug. Miguel joined me later, holding a newspaper. "She's gone," he said. "We're county custody. Evaluation, maybe." "You broke her, man." I stared at the water. "I didn't break her. She broke herself." Lydia stopped by after lunch. "Guess what? The county voted to return all seized HOA fees to residents. Everyone's getting refund checks. You're officially the most popular man in Seaview Shores." I chuckled. Can't wait to see that on a bumper sticker. But when she left, I walked back inside the cabin and looked around. Every board, every nail, every photo told a story of survival. Yet something felt heavy. Like the ghosts of her arrogance still clung to the walls. I picked up the community guest house sign I'd tossed into the trash weeks ago. It was cracked, the letters faded. I nailed it to the back wall of my workshop, not as decoration, but as a reminder. Because in this neighborhood, people didn't just fight over fences, they fought over control, power, ego, and the only way to survive was to remember what actually mattered. That night I watched the sunset turn the ocean orange and gold. The air smelled of salt and sawdust. The cabin's windows glowed. Karen's empire had fallen. The HOA was gone. The neighbors were free. And for the first time in a long time, the beach felt like home again. Still, as I locked up for the night, I caught myself glancing out toward the dunes, half expecting to see her silhouette standing there. But the sand was smooth. The tide had erased every footprint. The storm was finally over. 3 months later, the beach was back to what it used to be. Quiet, patient, and honest. The salt air carried no shouting, no threats, no HOA inspection squads. Just the soft rhythm of waves kissing the shore, the same way they did when my father and I first built the cabin. But even in peace, the echoes of that chaos lingered. Every few days I'd get calls from reporters, podcasters, even law students writing papers on the Seaview Shores HOA scandal. Lydia joked that I'd become the poster child for standing up to suburban tyranny. Miguel even designed a t-shirt, "Abandoned, Not Today, Karen." I didn't wear it, but I'll admit I kept one in the drawer. One morning as I was fixing the porch railing, I saw a black SUV pull into the drive. For a second, my heart sank. The image of Karen's shiny HOA mobile still burned into my brain. But when the door opened, a man in a navy windbreaker stepped out, flashing a badge. "Mr. Hayes." "Yeah," I said cautiously. "Depends who's asking." He smiled. "Special Agent, Turner, U.S., Department of Housing and Urban Development Fraud and Compliance Division, HUD, Federal." This was new. He shook my hand firmly. "We're conducting an investigation into fraudulent property claims and HOA misappropriation in multiple Florida counties. Your case triggered some red flags. We'd like your cooperation." "Cooperation," I said slowly. "You mean testimony?" He nodded. "And maybe insight. You seem to have a knack for catching crooks who hide behind rules." I couldn't help but laugh. "You've been talking to Benton, haven't you? Let's just say your reputation precedes you," Turner said. We sat on the porch while the ocean hummed in the background. I walked him through everything: the fake abandonment filings, the Airbnb listings, the falsified seals. He took notes like a man who'd seen this a dozen times before. When I finished, he closed the folder and said, "You realize what you uncovered wasn't just one rogue HOA, right?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" He leaned back. "Karen's cousin Cheryl, she wasn't acting alone. We've tracked similar schemes in 3 neighboring counties. They'd identify neglected homes, file forged abandonment claims, and funnel rental profits through HOA accounts. It's organized fraud." I stared at him. "You're saying this was bigger than Seaview Shores?" He nodded. "Much bigger. And your footage is the missing link." For a long moment I didn't say anything. The waves crashed, the gulls called, and I thought about all those endless HOA meetings where Karen bragged about being connected and in the know. Turns out she was just in all the wrong ways. Turner handed me his card. "We'll need a formal statement in writing. And one more thing, we might want you to appear at the federal hearing when the indictments drop." "Indictments?" He smiled. "Yes, Mr. Hayes. We're not just shutting down your old HOA. We're taking down the whole ring." By the end of that week, it was official: federal investigation into HOA fraud ring expands. The headlines stretched from Florida to Georgia. Karen's photo, the one from court, her mouth open mid-denial, was everywhere. Lydia texted me an article with the caption, "You've gone national." Miguel dropped by later laughing. "Dude, I just saw you on TV again. You're the whistleblower with a beach view." I groaned. "I didn't blow the whistle. I just hit record." "Same thing," he said, cracking open a beer. Still, part of me couldn't help but smile. For months, I'd been the target of Karen's wrath find, accused, humiliated. Now her empire of HOA bureaucracy was collapsing under the weight of her own arrogance. The following month, the subpoenas went out. Karen, Cheryl, and 4 HOA presidents from nearby communities were charged with wire fraud, falsification of records, and illegal property seizure. Federal charges. Not fines, not suspensions. Real prison time offenses. The day the news broke, Lydia and I sat on the porch listening to the distant sirens that rolled through the neighborhood. She handed me a coffee and said, "You realize you just helped take down one of the biggest HOA scams in the state, right?" I shook my head. "All I wanted was my cabin back." She grinned. "Sometimes justice has ambition." When I testified in court, Karen didn't look at me once. Her lawyer did most of the talking, trying to argue diminished responsibility. But when the prosecutor played the drone footage of her painting over my father's nameplate, the jury didn't even blink. Karen's sentence came 2 weeks later: 2 years for fraud plus restitution. Cheryl got 18 months. The rest cut deals for lesser charges. After the hearing, I walked outside feeling lighter than I had in years. Turner met me by the steps. Nice work in there, he said. You handled that like a pro. I smirked. Guess I've been through enough HOA meetings to handle hostile crowds, he chuckled. Ever consider consulting? We could use someone who knows how these people think. I raised an eyebrow. You offering me a job, let's call it a collaboration. I didn't answer right away. I just looked out at the horizon, the endless stretch of blue that reminded me of my father's laugh and the smell of cedar planks baking in the Sunday. Maybe it was poetic, or maybe it was just closure, but I felt it then, the end of one story and the start of another. I'll think about it, I said finally. Good Turner replied. Because the next HOA might not go down as easily. He left me with a firm handshake and a quiet respect that felt heavier than any applause. Weeks passed. The neighborhood rebuilt itself without the HOA's iron grip. Kids played in the street again, someone repainted their house bright turquoise just because they could, and the flag that once cost a veteran a $200 fine now flew freely in the ocean breeze. One morning, I went down to the beach with a hammer and a small wooden plaque I'd made myself. I nailed it to the base of the porch post, where Karen once stood yelling about community regulations. The plaque read, Hayes Cabin Est, 1998, property of nobody but family. As I stood there watching the tide come, in a convoy of helicopters, thundered across the horizon, 3 sleek black ones flying low over the water. I smiled. Miguel's voice echoed in my head. Man, you caught them on camera and brought in the feds. What's next, Black Hawk helicopters? Guess life has a sense of humor. That night I sat by the fire pit, the surf whispering just beyond the dunes. Lydia dropped by with her usual sarcastic grin. You know, she said there's talk of making a documentary about all this. Maybe even a dramatized version. I laughed. What HOA wars the reckoning, she smirked. More like the man who outlawed Karen. I raised my cup. To peace then. She clinked hers against mine. And to never attending another HOA meeting again. We sat in silence, watching the fire crackle the stars reflected in the still water beyond. For the first time in years, I felt my father's presence in the quiet, not in the anger or the fight, but in the calm that followed. Sometimes justice doesn't come in thunder or gavel strikes. Sometimes it comes in the sound of waves finally washing everything clean. As the fire burned low, I whispered to the ocean, You were right, Dad. Build it right the first time, and it'll stand through any storm. And it had. The cabin, the truth, the legacy, all of it had survived the hurricane of Karen's madness. Now it was just me, the sea, and a porch light shining against the dark. Peace earned the hard way.